VDI Explained. One of the main objectives that IT departments have is to enhance overall business efficiency through the use of technology. This objective came to the forefront after COVID-19 forced businesses around the world into remote operations. Virtual desktop infrastructure, also known as VDI, became a lifeline for many businesses as it allowed them to carry on seamlessly without disruption. Before this pandemic hit, however, many businesses and IT departments did not have the proper remote workforce solution put in place to sufficiently support their operations. Almost overnight, IT teams worked fast to put infrastructure in place to accommodate their employees' work-from-home environment. As we hear talk about a new normal, it is important for businesses to rethink their infrastructure in order to adjust and adapt to our new way of life. Thank you for joining us today for a co-hosted webinar between our information technology and information security teams as we break down VDI and its benefits to IT managers, security administrators, and business owners alike. In this webinar, we'll go over key concepts of VDI, security advantages of VDI, use cases for VDI, adjusting to a new normal with VDI, and operational benefits of VDI. There will be a Q&A session after the presentation, but feel free to leave any questions or comments that you have in the chat box.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us this morning. As you heard, we are talking about virtual desktop interface, VDI, and that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but we figured it was pertinent now in the time of responding to COVID-19, but kind of thinking through next steps of how your business is going to move forward and in what way from a remote connectivity standpoint. So that's what we have on the docket for today. With me, I have several of my colleagues here that are going to be talking about different things related to VDI. Matt Halliday, our IT project manager, is going to be talking about the benefits of VDI to both at the organizational level and the IT operations level. Tracy DeRosa, one of our senior members of our IT team, is going to be talking about the use cases of VDI, both amongst our customer base, and generally speaking. And Brian Brunel, our director of risk management and audit, is going to be talking about the security of VDI and the security benefits specifically of VDI. So without further ado, I'd like to jump into our session here, starting with Matt, who's going to be talking about some of the benefits of VDI.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. So, one of the big things, obviously, that is apparent is, everybody wants to talk about is cost. Right now, costs are a very important topic of discussion, especially just based on, how much is going on in the world and the reliability of the business. So VDI is actually a great way to introduce some cost savings into your business. So one of the big things is it allows you to consolidate your IT infrastructure, right? And so you get to reduce your footprint, you reduce your internal spending on your hardware internally, and it also allows you to look at which is kind of a newer thing, is to look at the actual footprint of your office space. We've heard of a lot of specific customers that are talking about reducing their footprint of their office and allowing users to work remotely. So that goes right into the next aspect of allowing users to be able to work remotely and having the mobility and kind of agility of a business that can function in this new environment, right? So having the ability to allow your employees to work remotely is a huge plus, especially right now. So we have a customer that essentially said, hey, we're acquiring a new business. We have 30 new employees that we need to get spun up. Normally you're looking at, ordering hardware, shipping it to the office or remotely to the employees. Whereas you can say, okay, hey, let's spin up a VDI environment, right? So what we did is we set up a VDI environment for our client. We took up in those 30 users and they were remote. We spun them up and they all had remote equipment available to them, so they could actually access the files they needed to be able to access very quickly. They didn't need to wait for any kind of shipments, and they can do it all remotely from their personal device. So BYOD is obviously a really large part of this as well. We can't expect every employee to have a functioning computer directly from the office. A lot of people have devices at home that they can use, and you get to, with VDIs, Brian will talk about this a little bit later, but you actually get a lot more security with the VDIs because you control everything from the VDI aspect. So you don't have to worry about as much of the endpoints and local computers just from a security aspect. So allowing us to quickly spin these up reduces downtime. The last thing we want to do is have employees just kind of sitting around without anything to do. So allowing us to spin those up really quickly and provision them allows us to just get you up and ready and running a lot faster than having to wait, up to 2 to 4 weeks for some hardware delivery shipments that we've seen. So COVID obviously isn't going to be the only scenario where you might need to have something like this happen. Maybe an office closes, or you need to relocate temporarily from a leasing standpoint. This allows you the flexibility to quickly spin up environments without having to worry about what are we going to do for the employees, how are they going to be able to access. You just set up the VPN on their local computer, connect to the VDI, and you're ready to go. So from agility, from a cost savings perspective, and just from also a happiness standpoint, a lot of people are really excited to kind of be able to have a couple of days off out of the office, and this allows you to have a little bit more flexibility with that going forward of the new workforce. So I know that Tracy has a lot of customer insight, so I'll kick it over to Tracy.
Thanks, Matt. Good morning. So as Matt kind of talked about, we discussed, the bring your own devices, and right now in the instance where COVID is hitting close to home, it's emerging as a challenge for IT teams and business leaders to kind of get everything centralized, so mobile virtual desktops gives us the ability to maintain the apps in one location and basically make your infrastructure be in one place. So the data, the authentication, the credentials, it eliminates the need to store the sensitive data on the user's device. It can be stored in the data center. And it's a secure way that enables you to access the information anytime, anywhere, and basically on any device, which in this world right now, disaster hits, and we need to be able to connect to these devices quickly, and having them in this data center allows for that. It allows for quick uptime. It allows for a complete solution to allow you to connect in. Another use case, as we had referenced, was the COVID-19 right now. VDIs can make the job of implementing a desktop disaster recovery strategy more straightforward and doable. A lot of the times the IT departments for smaller businesses, which we do handle a lot, don't have the capability of handling a disaster. So having this infrastructure in place ahead of time, it basically allows you to design desktop images and systems ahead of time. So when a disaster strikes, workers can quickly be shifted, and you can connect in from your own devices and continue to access your workspace without purchasing of additional equipment like Matt had mentioned. And by doing this allows user productivity to be unimpeded, and workers can carry on with no downtime. I think we saw a lot of this recently, where we had to work very quickly with users and businesses to get them connected into their environments. And if VDI had been implemented for these small businesses, it would have been much quicker and less time and less money, and operating expenses would have had to have been put into it. VDI also allows us to have centralization of management. In the IT world, we all know that patches, security updates, antivirus, making sure that these machines are up to date can sometimes be a nightmare for companies. So the VDI infrastructure gives you the ability to distribute these patches to hundreds of machines quickly. And it also gives us the ability to kind of troubleshoot if we're having problems with those. And that's critical for businesses, as you know, time is money. So the less time to manage these images in these computers, the better for the company. It also is a more reliable way of connecting in. You're relying on older pieces of equipment, and it's allowing us to kind of use a golden image for different purposes. And the ease of deployment and updating allows for multiple business purposes to be allocated ahead of time. And again, it's that if we can get things done ahead of time, it will allow us to be ready in the event of a disaster. And so that's it for me, and I'd like to turn it over to Brian for some security aspects.
Sure. Thank you, Tracy and Matt. Obviously, again, this is a joint effort here that GraVoc's undertaking between information technology and information security. And that's because when you talk about something like VDI or any of these new technology solutions here, there's a lot of crossover. So, as Tracy and Matt were talking about a lot of the IT benefits, those double as security benefits. And I'll talk about those in a little bit more detail as we go through. But from a general perspective, I just wanted to point out, VDI provides more security due to, its virtualized nature. So instead of having physical machines distributed over a geographic, area, whether that's, your office or multiple offices or employees' homes in your office, you have your virtual desktops are all existing in one cloud or data center, your cloud provider. And that gives you the ability to isolate your systems better, again, because they're virtual, not physical machines, and also the ability to layer security into multiple levels there. So whether that's image management, so that golden image that Tracy and Matt were talking about from the patch manager perspective, your threat detection, your log management, VDI provides a lot of opportunities where you do have to configure things securely and properly to meet your business needs and the security needs, but there's a lot of opportunities there that are made easier by VDI infrastructure. The first piece of that is probably that it's agnostic to the end device. So we were talking about mobile device management and bring your own device. If you've configured your VDI instance correctly, none of your data is going to be living on the end device, the personal owned device, the employee owned device, whatever it is. All your data is going to live within the data center that hosts the virtual desktop infrastructure. So you're not relying on the physical hardware. And, if you're leveraging something like AWS or Azure, you're also taking advantage of their data centers, their security in those data centers, as well as, their uptime, their availability. So, you're not concerned about a disaster taking out your internet connection or things like that. As long as you can get an internet from anywhere, you're going to be able to log into that environment. And likely, Azure, AWS, they have high availability, high redundancy in their systems. That VDI infrastructure is going to be there. So again, we're not concerned about the end device. We just need an internet connection. And we're not really concerned about the nature of that internet connection. So whether that's from your office or that's from your employees' houses, or if that's from Starbucks, properly configured VDI can mitigate the risks of having an unsecured Wi-Fi. Again, everything, think of it like a secure container where all your data, security, all your transactions are occurring. You can manage everything within that container, so you don't pair the device or the connection into that. Doubling back on what Tracy and Matt were talking about, the golden image. So you have, a base level image that's used every time somebody logs into the VDI to spin up that specific instance that they're logging into. So that means that, if you're doing patch management, application rollouts, taking down an application, configuration changes, changes to your group policies, you only have to make those in one place. And those virtual desktops are always reachable and always available. IT people will tell you it's a constant struggle to try to maintain patch compliance because, a machine might have needed to be rebooted or, it wasn't turned on. That's no longer an issue when you have VDI because that base level image is always going to be available. It's always going to be online for you to, manage from an information security perspective. Same thing, because all of your infrastructure is in one place, backup configuration management becomes much easier. It's easier to leverage, again, if you're in Azure or AWS, what they have available to you in terms of backup infrastructure. Again, your data is just going to be on that host environment, and it'll be easy to map that over to, a secure backup. Same thing from incident and virus and threat management. Again, because your systems are virtual, they're easy to isolate. If you do have any sort of security incident, you can easily destroy the virtual desktop without much of an impact. Again, the data is not on that end machine. It's not even in that actual virtual instance. It's going to be on the servers. And you can disable other various services if you're detecting something like a ransomware attack. And again, if a hacker does get in, which, the number one threat we're still going to always talk about from an information security standpoint is phishing and credential compromise. But having something like VDI, again, properly configured, makes it much harder for the hacker to move around laterally. Again, it's not like a physical network where everything's actually connected. It's just virtualized. So again, it's easier to isolate. It's easier to build in the layered controls. One thing that you'll come across as you start to research VDI and the advantages of VDI security is the concept of persistent versus non-persistent. Basically, the difference is there of, if you choose persistent, every time your user logs into that VDI, they're going to be logging into that same instance that will be maintained when they're logged off. Non-persistent VDI means every time they log off, that actual VDI instance gets ripped down, and when they log in the next time, the new one stands up. It does depend on your specific business needs, but the security stance would be to go with the non-persistent, because again, if you're wiping out that virtual image, any malware or other types of viruses or other things that might have gotten into that VDI during that use get destroyed along with the VDI. From an information security standpoint at GraVoc, we've had several clients, a couple that have leveraged VDI for various compliance initiatives. They're mostly, these are clients that were targeting different initiatives. So ISO 27001 was one that we specifically use VDI. There was trying to comply with the standards of that of ISO 27001. They had all different requirements about what they needed to have for group policy, for user management, for access control, for where their data could be processed and how their data could be handled. And to help them achieve that, again, this was a smaller company that was in a startup type environment that didn't have a ton of overhead, didn't have a huge office space. We utilize VDI. All your employees can continue to work from their house, and we can implement all the tenets of that standard right into the VDI infrastructure. High trust is another one where, again, a pretty strict standard from the healthcare side of it. There's a lot of tenets about what you can and can't do with protected health information. And again, a VDI is a great way to meet all those standards without, having to totally lock down an employee's personal device. Or again, even just within your office, you can have dedicated systems that you would operate on for the high trust work versus, your regular work. And again, VDI allows for that scalability. And, specifically if you have any sensitive information, you mean visibility and control over that through proper VDI configuration. So as everyone knows about GraVoc, we are a Microsoft partner. So I'll speak quickly about some of the advantages there. And Microsoft, has a security stack starting from their data centers to their O365 security tenants. And that goes everything from security for people, which is their, Microsoft Identity and Access Management, security for data, document management, data loss prevention, and information governance policies, Azure security for devices, whether that be Intune or app security, and then Azure threat detection. So again, you're talking about the full product suite of Microsoft security that they can bring and that your business can leverage. So again, it's going to be very difficult for any, small to mid-sized business to replicate that sort of security environment on their own or, at any sort of, acceptable cost. Whereas if you move to a VDI infrastructure, a lot of those tenants are built into the hosting provider. So in this case, Microsoft and Azure have all these tenants in place that, again, you're doing everything from log management for your threat detection to managing who's logging in to managing where your sensitive data is going and on which devices it can be reached from. Again, VDI allows you to configure all of that based upon your use case to what makes sense and what's most secure for you. The last component then again is still remember the security guy in me, as I will always say, it's not a silver bullet. You still have to be aware that, you can still be social engineered. Your end users can still be social engineered. If somebody gets you can set up secure multi-factor authentication and strong passwords, but if your users are, doing things inappropriately or subject to phishing emails, again, VDI is not going to stop everything. But again, it provides a lot of opportunities and a lot more customization around, okay, what are you doing? And, what's your use case and what are the security goals that you're trying to meet? That would be very difficult if you were dealing with a full physical environment. Within VDI, you can achieve a lot more. And I think that's it for me from the security side. Again, we would go with specifics on any use case, but we'll turn it over back to the group.
Thanks, Brian. That was a great overview. I think what we heard there is that VDI gives you a lot of flexibility, which in the security world is usually a word that we cringe about, because flexibility means convenience, and convenience usually means more attack vectors. But my role at GraVoc is obviously on both sides of this coin, on the IT operations side, but also on the security side. And I think VDI, as you said, kind of marries the two together nicely. You can have your flexibility in terms of your staff, where they work, how they work, and where they're dialing in from. But you can also have the control and the centralization of control through the VDI console, if you will. So I heard a lot of good options there too. You mentioned public and private clouds. Obviously the public option with Azure and AWS, but this can be done in a public cloud or a private cloud environment. We've seen many of our customers go this route, where particularly in the banking space, where they're using a core provider that offers other cloud offerings on a private, network type basis. And this is just one additional service that they're offering in their private cloud. So there's, it can be set up any which way, depending, again, as you said, on the use case. So just kind of taking a step back, and part of the reason why we brought this up today was that we saw firsthand from an IT perspective, many of our clients scrambling to get remote connectivity up and running when the stay-at-home or shelter-in-place orders related to COVID-19 were put in place. And on the security side, at the same time, we were being asked to vet the security of those solutions, not necessarily for the same clients, but for other clients who had done something similar with their managed IT provider. And they said, oh, let's take a step back and make sure that the connectivity is working now. Let's make sure that we're actually doing what we were supposed to be doing. So obviously hindsight is 2020, but really what we're talking about today is, going forward, as people look at what the next steps are going to be for their organization, particularly, one dialogue that I've been having with many clients is, do we even need to go back to the office, or what does going back to the office look like now that we've proven to ourselves that we can work remotely and on a collaborative basis from home? And how many people do we need to come back into the office? And how does that look in terms of how much space we lease or how much space, we occupy? I think VDI it plays a really big role in that decision, or at least should have some consideration when discussing what work looks like in the future for your organization. You might decide that you want everybody back and everybody's more productive when they're all under one roof, and that might be the right decision for your business. But there are a lot of companies that highly doubt that. In fact, they have evidence to the contrary to say, this is the better model for us going forward. However, we'd like to change some of the things that we did in a rushed way to try to get people just up and running and really rethink and re-architect this. And that's where they're having conversations, more, broader based conversations on remote connectivity in general, and how VDI can help in that process. So, there's the thin client versus zero client type discussion, which is kind of one layer deeper than the one that we're having today. Both, have, their benefits and their trade-offs. Most people are more familiar with the thin client setup because it's more, like computing used to be with terminal services and connecting into a mainframe and all those, good things. But there's a lot to kind of unpack with the VDI discussion. I think today we're really just looking at it as, okay, let's give this subject as a whole some consideration as to how we adjust to, I think in the outline we said the new normal, which is the buzz term of the month, I guess. Just trying to really conceptualize what work looks like for our organizations moving forward. So I don't know. I can kick it over to Matt or Tracy based on kind of what I just outlined there, and maybe talk about some of the conversations we're having with some of our clients on the IT operations side of things as they look to kind of re-architect what they're doing and how they're doing it. Particularly as we go back to this phase or this next phase of reopening. And in particular, maybe we can talk about kind of how administration in the VDI model from our MSP perspective could have some added benefits in terms of response times and things like that, because we've all together as a company stopped doing site visits, which was, on the IT side of things, if you had asked us at the beginning of the year if that was going to happen, we'd tell you were crazy. It was such a big part of what we did for our clients. But we have managed over these last 2+ months to really reduce, if not altogether eliminate, site visits for our clients. And I think most of them are happy with the results of how we've adapted the service. But the VDI could obviously be another have another benefit on that whole aspect of being able to, get to their problems more quickly, assist end users more quickly, because it's all centralized in terms of the management of the desktops, which are often the things causing the most trouble. So
to take silver linings out of all of these situations, right, is to say, let's future-proof ourselves, right? So what can we do to make our business stronger and more agile for the future? Because, when this all clears up and everything goes back to, what Nate said, whatever the new normal is, there still might be things down the line that you can look at differently, whether it's, how you're accessing the data that you're accessing or where you're accessing it from. There might be situations that are similar to this, maybe not in such a destructive manner, but if there's, like I said before, an office outage or things like that, you want to be able to have the flexibility and the agility to be able to move from option to option without having to have a major impact on your business, right? So again, all comes back to cost and efficiency, and every company really wants to be agile, but this is one of the really great ways I think that you can implement that and say you can point to it from a security perspective, from a cost perspective, and just from an employee perspective to say, hey, look, you're not feeling great today. Here, you can remote in, perfect. That's going to make a happier employee, which is going to make a better workplace. There's a lot of positive spin you can put on here, but I think just highlighting the flexibility aspect and the agility aspect of this is a really huge point. But you can go ahead, Tracy.
Yeah, so to kind of piggyback what you were saying, Matt and Nate, the ability to be able to centrally manage desktop is huge in the IT world. I think for a lot of end users, time is of the essence. So when a user calls in and they've got an issue, a lot of the times we need to be able to connect in with them remotely and kind of troubleshoot what's going on their machine. And having this central managed console, we can, say, okay, which user, what machine, we'll connect in quickly to the users and be able to troubleshoot the issues much quicker than if we needed to connect in with them out in the field. And, the security aspect of it, being able to connect it from that secure data center and not be concerned about connecting it to an end user's computer that may not have, up-to-date antivirus or something on their computer that would then infect our computers. Keeps the security aspect of it great, and I think a huge takeaway of what's happened of late is the ability to plan ahead. Disaster recovery really, have seen a lot of it with our customers now, reevaluating their plans and saying, hey, we didn't really have something in place. Let's put it in place now, and let's assess, what type of desktops we may need for users. That way, if something like this does again, and those companies have a plan in place for these customized, you would say, desktops for users and different business purposes, it will just make transition from in the office to the virtual desktop much smoother, and allow companies to have control for that and update those images and get users connected to what they need when they need it quickly. And I think that's, again, the buzz word, I think, is quick. Everybody wants quick and this infrastructure gives you the ability to have that. So I think at this point, Nate, I think you would want to ask for any questions.
Yeah, we can open it up to some questions here. I think we've covered kind of the main areas that we wanted to cover today in terms of both the benefits and the use cases. And obviously this conversation becomes more valuable to the audience when they can ask their questions and talk about their specific use cases or what they're thinking of in terms of an approach. So let's do that now. Let's open it up to some questions here. All right, looks like we got a few questions here. First one being, is VDI offered by anyone or is it specific to Azure AWS? What is the role of a company like GraVoc in determining the best way to go? We covered a little bit the public and private options. So it can be a cloud strategy. It can be an on-prem solution. There's really multiple options there. So I think the role of a company like GraVoc is taking a look at the client and how they operate and determining the best path forward, as we do with any piece of infrastructure. But I can kick it over to Tracy to go more in depth on, since she covered use cases, maybe that falls in line with this here. So Tracy, what are your thoughts on that matter?
Thanks, Nate. So I think that the concept of VDI can, as we had mentioned, the public and the private cloud, we have a lot of customers that are looking for the ability to not have to manage and maintain that infrastructure. So that would be more of like the public cloud for the VDI, and it could be offered through Azure, AWS. There's also VMware, another company. Microsoft also offers the ability to do it private cloud internal to your infrastructure. We do have some customers that have servers that would be able to manage that infrastructure with licensing and added resources to those types of devices. And, I would think that could satisfy some business needs for maybe having 5 or 6 workstations, or not that many, but the ability to have the VDI infrastructure in place if something like a disaster hit, to be able to use that. And I also know that Nate, you had mentioned a little bit about the thin client versus pro clients, and the thin clients, I guess, are kind of what customers are using now because of the pandemic, where you have a laptop, you can install applications on that laptop, and you're connecting into a VDI infrastructure or a workstation in your office. A lot of our customers needed to do. And there's the zero client, which is built specifically for the VDI infrastructure, where it's a broken down version of an operating system. So the security is very locked down, and it makes it much more secure for you connecting into that VDI infrastructure. So I think that answers that.
Yeah, quick follow-up question. Is that a real cat or one of those Teams cats that we learned about in other webinar sessions?
That's a real cat.
Yeah. All right. Second question that came in: can VDI work with any device like an iPad through Safari, where a user has full Windows access to the VDI? The short answer is yes. The VDI can be set up to be device agnostic, but let me kick that one over to Matt Halliday to kind of expand on that.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. Yeah, so that's actually a great question. I think that that's one that is on a lot of people's minds. There's a number of people I know, especially a lot of my good colleagues back in New York, where they couldn't even get back into the office to get their equipment. Right. So that leaves you with only a few options. Maybe you only have an iPad or iPad Pro or Mini or, some kind of Fire tablet or whatever it is. And as Nate mentioned earlier, it is, you can make it device agnostic. So, as long as you have access to, internet, and you have, whether it's a Microsoft Remote Desktop app or any other kind of proprietary app, those are available in, the Apple App Store, the Google Play Store. So you can connect through pretty much any device. Obviously, you'll still have, the limitations of a touchscreen versus like a mouse and keyboard that we're all, accustomed to. But it does still allow you, if you needed to quickly emergency, remote in and, share a file with somebody or do something, very quickly. I think that that's 100% plausible, but I also do know people that work fully off of iPad Pros, with one of the pens. So really this solution allows you to say, hey, what do you have at home? Great, here's a solution for it. There's almost any way to work around any of the device, as long as it's set up as a device agnostic environment. You can have your employees up and running and ready to go, with whatever they have at home. So
thanks, Matt. Yeah, one of our listeners here had a good point, that when they went to look at VDI a few years back, they found that there were some limitations with certain device limitations with certain applications. And at the application layer, I think that's always going to be the case. I think the point of VDI being able to work in a device agnostic environment itself, just the nuts and bolts of it, is still valid, but it's certainly a consideration when you're looking at VDI, looking at the application space and the application layer of your operation, and seeing if those things can support functioning in a VDI environment. So a very important point, again, by one of the people in the audience here, and worth mentioning. So the last of the three original questions that we had, more of a kind of a thought that we're going to expand on here, said many COVID-19 back to office scenarios involve scheduling even if you are going back to the office. Seems like VDI can really give companies an opportunity to flex schedule without missing a beat and do it securely. So, I mean, I heard the keyword secure here, so I'm just going to kick it over to Brian to talk about, how that can happen and what his thoughts on that matter are.
Sure. Thank you, Nate. And yeah, Dave, that's a dead on point. Obviously COVID-19 has been an interesting situation for a lot of businesses here, and all businesses have had to consider their disaster planning, especially in terms of, their remote work. And of course, now we're in the phase of slowly starting to return to the offices and that whole new normal. So, that is still within the life of the disaster, and, definitely within something that VDI would take advantage of. Again, just think about, you're no longer, what VDI allows you to do is not be reliant upon a physical office space. You just need that internet connection into that VDI infrastructure. So yes, that could be hosted on-prem or in the cloud, but as long as there's a way for your users to be able to connect into that environment, it's the same thing as if they're sitting in next to each other in, desk working on a central server, down the hall in the server room. So, the advantages are there from that perspective. It's business continuity, it's business resumption. It's disaster recovery. All those aspects can be accomplished through VDI. There's advantages that can be gained and leveraged. If you look in, plan, configure those things correctly, that for, when these scenarios come, you're already set up and ready to go. It's just a matter of flipping that switch. So definitely a good point, Dave. And yeah, I mean, that's what we got.
Great. It doesn't look like we have any more questions. So I guess we can wrap up here. We appreciate you joining us today. Before we close, I do want to give a shout out to our creative technology team who helps us put all of these on, make us look a lot better than we actually do. I had to reapply my makeup a few times, but overall they get the video going so that we look good and sound good, and the production quality is something that we couldn't do without them. So thanks to the creative tech team. Thank you all for joining us today. Have a good one.